Welcome back to the Nerdy Grail and welcome to what could actually be quite a lengthy video, but the reason for doing this video is I have, in the last week or so, just gone over my 2-year anniversary of the channel. Yes, 2 years on YouTube, and so I thought to celebrate I've got to do something big and do a video idea that I've thought about for quite a very long time but never actually done. I've done it in different formats where I've taken sections of it and done a ranking or a tier list or something on that, but never as a full collective. What am I talking about? I'm of course talking about Doctor Who, in terms of I've done rankings for classic Doctors, I've done rankings of the classic series, I've done rankings of the modern Doctors and the modern series, you know, doing like top 10 best episodes or worst episodes or my episode rankings for every Doctor. But what I've never done is sat down, thought about every single season of the show from 1963 to 2025 and done an overall ranking where I've combined the two, both classic and modern, to determine how they are up against each other and which season or seasons are actually my least favourite and which ones are my personal favourites of all time in the show's history. So what this section of the video is, as you noticed, I'm not actually in my usual tier list ranking. That's going to be the next section of the video. I will have put something on the screen giving you a bit of a timestamp of when I'm actually going to start doing the ranking. So if you don't want to listen to the rules for this particular ranking, like how I'm going to be ranking it, or any exceptions to the ranking, then you feel free to skip and just get straight into the ranking. But if you do want to hear any exceptions that I have put onto here and how I am going to be ranking them, then stay tuned just for a little bit as I'm going to explain that right now. So first I'm going to talk about some of the exceptions to it. So these are stories or eras that aren't going to appear on the list at all because it's really hard to specify and classify them as an era and pinpoint like my enjoyment because maybe I've not seen a lot of it, heard a lot of it, so on and so forth. So obviously, the first thing I'm not going to be talking about on this list is I'm not going to include any of the Peter Cushing movies. So the 2 Peter Cushing movies that are based on the Doctor Who stories of the Daleks and the Dalek invasion of Earth, they're not going to appear at any point on this list. But just know, I do actually quite like them. I think they are quite fun, but overall, I'm not going to put them in comparison to the proper stories or any of the other seasons within the mainline show, because I wasn't really sure where to place them. I'm also not going to be talking about the wilderness years, so any specials like Downtime, or even the Doctor Who TV movie. Yes, I'm really sorry, Paul McGann, but they are not going to be included on this overall list as well, due to them not being real seasons, them being like one-off specials, so to speak, so I'm not going to be including them. But again, just know, especially with the TV movie, that I do think the TV movie is thoroughly underrated and a fantastic piece of media, and obviously when it came out on the 4K Steelbook and regular 4K, and I watched it again for the first time in a long time, I thoroughly enjoyed it and I thought all the acting performances were great, and I do think it is an underrated little gem. Sure, it's different, but that's Doctor Who. It's a show about change and being different all the time. Now, the rules of the ranking. Now, there's lots of different things I had to try and consider. It was not easy and took me a very long time to actually sit down and rank these from my least favourite to favourite. There's 42 seasons that I'm ranking here, and I've got to think about so many different things. So these are the things that I've decided to consider. So firstly, I am going to be combining any specials. So if there's any specials, you know, like we've had like the 10th Doctor specials, the 13th Doctor specials, so on and so forth. If there are any specials, I've combined them with their nearest season or the season that they are most linked to. So for example, the 10th Doctor specials, so the Next Doctor, Planet of the Dead, Waters of Mars, End of Time Part 1 and 2, I've connected them with Season 4 because they belong with Season 4. Then like Day of the Doctor and Time of the Doctor, I have included them with Season 7 because they continue following along the plotline of Season 7 and the end of the Matt Smith era. And the 13th Doctor specials, so like Eve of the Daleks, The Legend of the Sea Devils, and The Power of the Doctor, I have combined those with Season 13 and Flux. The only exception to this specials rule is because 14 is an incarnation of the Doctor, I decided that I would allow those specials to be treated as a separate season. which is, so you'll see that in the list, that the 60th anniversary specials, so Star Beast, Wild Blue Yonder, and The Giggle are actually counted as a season, even though they're not. They're just some specials, but I thought otherwise 14 would also be off the list as well, like 8 is, but at least 14 has had multiple stories, whereas 8 only had the one TV movie, if that makes sense. The second thing is obviously it's going to be to do with my personal enjoyment of the season, like nostalgia for me, rewatchability, how often I go back to pick a story to watch from that particular season, whether it's the same story. Ideally, it should be like every story at some point or the vast majority. So my overall enjoyment of the season is going to play a role in how high I rank a season. So people's most popular seasons might not necessarily be on the list, but you'll just have to wait and see. And then the last major thing I'm going to be thinking about in terms of my rules is the ratio to good and bad stories. Now, I know this is objective, and I know lots of people think subjective, and I know some people think that some stories are good when actually they're bad, and vice versa. You know, it is to do with people's opinions. You could think good stories are bad and bad stories are good, but there is sort of a consensus among the fans, you know, a general consensus that they would say like a story is more often seen as good or bad, like Genesis of the Daleks, for example, or The Caves of Androzani. So I am going to be ranking it based on how many good stories are in said season and how many bad stories are in said season, but that won't always be the case. There might be a case where there is a season a little bit higher that has more bad than good, but the good are just so good that it outweighs the bad, if that makes any sense. But yes, I have rambled on long enough. I do have a cup of tea at the ready for this list. So now I'm going to jump into my ranking. So sit back, grab a bag of jelly babies as I rank all 42 seasons of Doctor Who from 1963 to 2025. Okay then, so let's jump straight into this list. As you can see, I've got 42 spots. I've got all the seasons down the bottom. So this is going to be a very long video, so I hope you've got a cup of tea or a snack at the ready. But here we go. So my least favourite season of all of Doctor Who is unfortunately going to season 16. So this is from the classic series. This is the Key to Time season. Now, before anyone jumps the gun, clicks off and says, oh my god, what is this list? Now, hear me out. Now, Tom Baker is my favourite Doctor. He is my favourite Doctor of all time. If you've seen any rankings, you know how much I love Tom Baker. He was the first Doctor I ever watched with The Hand of Fear. But I can't deny the Key to Time season is not the best. There is only really 2 stories within that season that I think are any good. I love The Androids of Tara, and I think Pirate Planet and Stones of Blood are just okay. But I'm not a big fan of the Ribos Operation or Ribos Operation. I'm not a fan of The Power of Kroll, and I'm not a fan of the Armageddon Factor. And I just hate the fact that they collect all the keys and then they just separate them all again at the end. You don't really see the Black Guardian, who's supposed to be this big threat after the key. I don't think Romana 1 and the 4th Doctor have a very good relationship together and spend most of their time apart. So there's not good chemistry there. I have not chosen to go back and rewatch the Key to Time season. And to be honest, I'm kind of glad that they left that season of Tom Baker Tale last on Blu-ray, because it is my least favourite season of his entire era, and it is like an overarching theme throughout that particular season. The entire season is the Key to Time season. But yeah, so I'm not a big fan, don't like the chemistry between the Doctor and the Companion. I think that at least 3 of the episodes out of the 6 are bad episodes, with 2 being mid and 1 being good, just because I love a bit of an android story. I've always think that's very good. But yeah, not a big fan of the Key to Time. That's just how it goes, unfortunately. Then in 41st place, I'm going to the modern era of the show, Jodie Whittaker's first season. Now, yeah, I mean, a lot of people probably anticipated this one to be quite low. And yeah, Jodie's first season is not the best season. Nothing against Jodie, though. I actually love Jodie a lot more in recent years than I used to. And I think the 13th Doctor is a little bit of an underrated Doctor, to be honest. Yes, it's a bit different, but they had reason to make it different. You know, and in terms of good to bad stories, I love Jodie's first story. The Woman Who Fell to Earth is such a fun post-regeneration story. I love the story Rosa. I definitely think the villain of that should have been the meddling monk. There's a couple of little glimpses here and there throughout the season where I like it. The companion relationship with the Doctor is not really the best. I saw what Chibnall was trying to do. He wanted to make it, you know, it was definitely accessible to new audiences. Like, you didn't need to really know the past in order to watch season 11. It is a jumping on point for the show, but there was like no real consideration to those who were literally coming off the back of Peter Capaldi's last story. You know, it was too different, too separated, and it sort of went down the pan, and I wasn't a huge fan of Series 11, if I'm being perfectly honest, so that's why it's very low on my list. Then coming in 40th place, then I have got Season 1. Which Season 1 in particular? Well, Ncuti Gatwa Season 1, 2024 edition Season 1. Yes, we've got 3 different Season 1s, so I've got to really specify which Season 1 I'm talking about here. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Ncuti's first season. Again, it's got similar problems to Jodie. But I just think the companion Doctor dynamic didn't really work very well. It wasn't fully believable that Ruby and Ncuti were best friends. I know they tried to say there was like a time jump, but it's rather show us, don't tell us. You know, we need to visually see that. We need to see the dynamic. They never really seem to be clashing with each other very much. And just the stories never really elevated me or lifted me, you know, so to speak. And there was tons of Dr. Light stories. It's a Doctor's first season. He needs to be in it more than ever before. So the fact that we had, like, I think it was like 2 or 3 Dr. Lightish stories, you know, through like 73 Yards and Dot and Bubble and stories like that, it just didn't really work. And I never truly felt like this Doctor was the hero that we saw in previous seasons. There was some stories I did enjoy, you know, like The Devil's Cord. I actually quite liked that one. I don't mind Dot and Bubble. I liked the idea of 73 Yards. And I didn't mind the reveal of Sutekh in the finale. I just don't think it was done in the best way. And I don't think they used Sutekh in the best way. And considering RTD was constant, like, this is a jumping on point season for the show, but then made the whole crux of the season about Pyramids of Mars from the classic era, I don't think it worked very well at all. A lot of characters felt underdeveloped. It just felt rushed. 8 episodes was not enough. So it is such a shame. And the whole plotline of Ruby's mother went nowhere, and that was the biggest disappointment, I think, of the lot. Then in 39th place, I have gone with Season 1. So this is William Hartnell's 3rd and final full season. He does come back at the start of Season 4, but this is his final full season. I've mostly put this one down low, not because I think the stories are bad, but because there's still a lot missing from this season. Like, we still don't have Mission to the Unknown, or the Myth Makers, or the Daleks Master Plan in its entirety, or the Massacre. So there's still at least like 3 to 4 stories missing from this season. And then the stories that we do have, I think, are like mid-range-ish stories. Like, I like the concept of the arc where it's 2 stories in a 4-part story. The first 2 parts happen, and then the TARDIS leaves, they come back, and there's another 2 parts. The Gunfighters, I think, is quite a fun little one with the musical accompaniment. The Celestial Toymaker, I think, is a really good story, and the War Machines is probably my favourite William Hartnell. I adore the War Machines, and it was the foundation template, if you ask me, for future unit stories. The Doctor working with the military to take on an alien threat in London, I think, is perfect. But I just don't think there's enough. I'm not also huge on Dodo Chaplet as a companion either. So that's why Season 3 is down so low. Then I've got Season 2, 2025 edition. So the most recent season of Doctor Who. Yeah, Ncuti's second season also was only slightly better than the first, only because I think there's a couple more stories that I enjoyed a lot more. I think the companion dynamic started off really well with Belinda Chandra, but then skyrocketed down and fell so flat. We don't even need to go into Wishful and Reality War destroying the whole show and causing this panic, this, you know, put to tender, you know, that all this stuff that's been going on in recent years. It's absolutely ridiculous. I was gobsmacked by the ending. It was terrible, destroying legacy characters like Omega. The Rani, I did like the actress who played the Rani, but I can't deny the Rani ended up being pointless, and poor Anita Dobson's version of the Rani got, you know, built up all through this era and then just got played second fiddle to this new Rani. The only stories that I really enjoyed was Lux and The Well. I love Mr. Ring-a-Ding. I think Mr. Ring-a-Ding was such a lovely idea. And The Well being a sequel to Midnight was interesting. It didn't really need to be done, but I did like the darker concept. But there was too much that still didn't work for me, unfortunately. And it's gutted that Ncuti's season did get cut short, and he never faced a Dalek. So what can you do? Number 37 then, I've got Season 9 from the Modern Era. So this is Peter Capaldi's second full season as the Doctor. Look, I love Peter Capaldi. I recently met him at a convention. Lovely guy. He is my favourite modern Doctor. But I can't deny I'm really not a fan of his second season. You know, a season full of just two-part stories. You know, I thought that was an interesting idea. I wasn't a huge fan of the concept of the hybrid, and unfortunately Clara Oswald was at her most annoying in this season. I know that was the point of her arc to some degree, where she became so reckless that it ended up killing her. But she just became intolerable by the end, and I just couldn't stand her. And there's just so many mid to bad stories in season 9. Yes, Heaven Sent is fantastic. Probably is definitely the best story in that season. I love the Christmas special, The Husbands of River Song. But that's about it. And then just here and there, you got little moments of gold, like the Doctor's speech in the Saigon two-parter. But they don't save the season. I'm not a massive fan of. I think it's Maisie Williams' character of a Shielder, stroke me. I'm not really huge on that, to be honest. So that's why it's so low. Then in 36th place, I've gone with season 12 from the modern era. So that is Jodie's second full season. Now I've enjoyed Jodie's second season a lot more recently. You know, when I think about it, the companion Doctor dynamic still wasn't great. There was still too many companions in the TARDIS. There was still some plot lines going all over the place. I did prefer having a couple of two-parters thrown in there to get some nice cliffhangers and keep the tension higher. You know, obviously, whereas the first season, Chibnall wanted no returning characters, I think he went a bit too far in this one, where, you know, the first two-parter brought back the Master and the destruction of Gallifrey. You know, then later in the season, we had the Jadoon, more Time Lords, we had a new incarnation of the Doctor, we had the return of Captain Jack, we had the finale with the Cybermen. You know, there was so much he just dumped on us in this season. But there was some stories I really enjoyed. I quite like, and I love Sasha's version of the Master. I know he's not a popular version for a lot of people, but I really liked Sasha's version, and I met him at a convention as well. Lovely guy. You know, I liked Fugitive Jadoon. I liked The Haunting of Villa Diodati. You know, I'm not really too mad now, especially with everything RTD2's done at the Timeless Child stuff anymore. You know, it's nothing in comparison. There is some real stinkers in this season, though, like Orphan 55, Praxius, and I always get this confused. I think it's Can You Hear Me, or something like that. I always get that one confused with an episode in season 11. But yeah, so there's a couple of stinkers in season 12. It's a little bit better, and Jodie's performance is a little bit better, but still not overly keen on season 12, which is why it's so low. Then coming in next, we've got season 15. So this is Tom Baker's 4th season as the Doctor. Ignore the picture. It was just, it is season 15. It's not season 18. So season 15, obviously this is the season that mostly is the Doctor and Leela. They introduced K9. You've got stories, like fantastic stories, like the Horror of Fang Rock is phenomenal. The Invisible Enemy I quite like. But then you've got real stinkers. Like, I'm not a fan of Image of the Fendal. Sunmakers I think is fun. But then I despise Underworld, and I'm not a fan of Invasion of Time, and I just think Leela's departure was done so poorly, makes no sense, that, I never really believed that at all. So because there's, and I haven't really gone back to rewatch that season an awful lot, I just don't think the dynamic between the Doctor, Leela, and K9 worked perfectly. So yeah, nothing really gelled together. It felt like a very mismatch of, you know, theming, of Doctor Companion, and tones were just a bit all over the place. So that's why that is so low for me. This one might shock some people because it is an anniversary season. I have then put season 20 at 34th place. Now I've never really fully connected with season 20. It feels like such an oddball in the Peter Davison era, between his first season and the last season, which I think are vastly much better than each other than this season. The only true gem in season 20 for me is the Five Doctors. The Five Doctors being a fantastic anniversary special. This was a season where they tried to throw everything at the wall. They tried to bring back a recurring character each story, like Omega in Arc of Infinity, the Mara in Snake Dance, the Black Guardian trilogy, which also brought back the Brigadier. They introduced new companions, got rid of new old companions like Nyssa, which, you know, and it was, I don't know, it just seemed all over the place. You had the King's Demons when they brought back the Master. Yeah, I just wasn't huge on it. I don't like Terminus as a story. I think Enlightenment is just okay. You know, King's Demons was a silly little two-parter, very predictable and rushed. Chameleon, you know, we all know the story behind Chameleon, which was so wasted. I don't know. It just felt like the season of wasted potential and just didn't really hit the highs that it wanted to, in my personal opinion. They brought back Tegan at the start of the season when she left at the end of the previous season. It was like, what was the point in that? So I don't know. It was just a bit all over the place. Then coming in 33rd place, I have got Season 4. So this is the last of the Hartnells and first season of Patrick Troughton. Again, I've put this one low because there's a lot of missing stories, like the Smugglers and the Highlanders. And then there's a few stinkers in this, like the Underwater Menace I don't think is very good. I'm personally not a fan of the Faceless Ones or Macra Terror. But the only stories I really like in this are the Cybermen and the Dalek stories. I love both the 10th Planet and the Moon Base, and Power and Evil of the Daleks I think are fantastic. But also another thing that drags this season down is I'm not a fan of Ben and Polly. Mostly Ben. I don't mind Polly, to be fair, but I'm not a fan of Ben, and especially when you've got the character of Jamie, I feel like Jamie and Ben were doing similar things, and obviously one would always be out of action, and Ben just never really clicked with me. He seemed a bit too arrogant, full of himself, a bit too like up for a fight all the time. And yeah, he just never really clicked with me, which really put me off the companion Doctor dynamic. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Season 4. Then moving into 32nd place, I then put Season 17, which is Tom Baker's 6th season. I know people are saying, why is there loads of Tom Baker seasons so low? What is going on if he's your favourite? Trust me, this is, you know, the rest of Tom's are going to be quite high on the list in comparison. But yeah, Season 17, unfortunately, like I said, in terms of ratio to good and bad, his companion dynamic with Romana 2 is a lot better than Romana 1. I definitely believe them as a TARDIS team a lot more. But I believe that the story-wise, it was a bit... like, Destiny is okay, but you could tell that there was low budget and some things just didn't make sense. City of Death is the only golden nugget in this season, which is one of the best Fourth Doctor and Doctor Who stories of all time. But then you've got, like, Nightmare of Eden and Creature from the Pit and The Horns of Nimon, which are, like, mid to mid-low. And then you've got Sharda, which obviously was pulled. And then we got different recreations of it, which is Sharda's a fun story, but obviously it's up in the air, where, you know, officially or not. But, yeah, so it's just a bit of a jumbled mess of a season, if you ask me. And it's not one that I race to rewatch. Then in 31st place, I have got the original season of Doctor Who, Season 1. So William Hartnell's very first season in the role. There was lots of promise, lots of potential in this season. Some great stories like the Daleks, the Edge of Destruction, the Reign of Terror, and the Aztecs in particular are some of my favourites. But obviously the big boy of Marco Polo still doesn't exist. I'm not a fan of the Reign of Terror. And I think even the stories that are good, like the Daleks and the Keys of Marinus, I think they go on a bit too long. There's a lot of 6 and 7 part stories in this season. I think An Earthly Child, the very first story, part 1 is absolutely fantastic, but parts 2 to 4, they really drag. So this, yeah, and also the companion dynamic. Look, I like Susan, Carol Ann Ford, fantastic, but I'm not the massive fan of Susan. I love Ian and Barbara, but Susan does get on my nerves a little bit, which is why it's so low. Next, we've got Season 24. So this is Sylvester McCoy's first season. Now, a lot of people would have expected this to be probably a lot lower, but I actually have quite a soft spot for Season 24 with Sylvester McCoy. 4 stories: Time of the Rani, Paradise Towers, Delta and the Bannerman, and Dragonfire. Time of the Rani is not a great story, but it is a fun story. Paradise Towers, again, is a fun story. I really enjoy it, and I think it's very underrated and very dark. Delta and the Bannerman has grown for me. I used to despise it. Now I quite like it. And again, a fun story. And then you've got Dragonfire, which has actually gone down for me, but it is still a decent story. It introduces us to Ace. We get Glitz again, and also we leave Bonnie Langford's Mel, who travels off with Glitz. So there's a lot going on in that story, and I think McCoy being the bit of the clownish Doctor is quite fun, even though we're more used to him being the more manipulative Doctor, the darker side of the Doctor. So I think it was interesting. I think it was a little too goofy, which is why it's on the lower side, but I still quite enjoy Season 24 for what it's worth. Then we've got Season 7, so Matt Smith, the last full Matt Smith season. So yes, this does include Day of the Doctor and Time of the Doctor, which, don't get me wrong, the 50th anniversary special with Day of the Doctor is absolutely brilliant. I love the 50th, and I think Matt Smith's final story is actually pretty good. It's a little confusing at times, but we do get a lot of his era's plot lines all, finalised, tied neatly with a bow, and solved by the end of the story, which is something I wish that RTD had taken into consideration with Ncuti, but obviously didn't happen. But it's a season of two halves, the Ponds and then Clara. And I think both are messy to a degree. Like Asylum of the Daleks, this big fest of previous Dalek designs and previous Daleks coming back, but it focused too much on Amy and Rory being separated and divorced, which we never believed and got solved in the same story. The Clara stuff with the prophecy in the second half. I like they brought back the Ice Warriors. It felt a lot more classic-y feel in the second half, but I don't know. I just don't feel like it's a well put together season because of the changeover of companions and tone halfway through. It just feels a bit of a jumbled mess, especially when an upcoming anniversary was happening. But it's still a fun season, and Matt Smith's still superb. I think he's superb in all of his seasons. Don't get me wrong, I love Matt Smith. He's fantastic. Then we've got season 9, so the first Jon Pertwee season to make it onto the list. From the classic era, coming in 28th place. Now, I do have a soft spot again for season 9. I think Day of the Daleks is quite fun. Curse of Peladon, I think, is hated, but I quite love it. I like that, the Doctor's a bit prejudiced, but, because he thinks the Ice Warriors are the villains, but it turns out they're not, they're the good guys. The Sea Devils is phenomenal, but I don't like the mutants, and I don't like the Time Monster. I think those two really drag down the season, but obviously Jon Pertwee and Katie Manning's relationship is fantastic, and the fight scene between the Doctor and Roger Delgado's Master and the Sea Devils is brilliant, but it is a recycled plot from the Silurians. But I will say it is a fun season, and deserves to be a little bit higher, but this is just how I feel personally. Then we've got season 5 coming in 27th place on the list. So the next Troughton, the second season of Troughton, and the first full season where it is just Patrick Troughton. Now, a lot of this season was lost. A lot of it's been animated in the past, like the Abominable Snowmen, the Ice Warriors, the Web of Fear, Fury from the Deep, stuff like that. But it's got like the Tomb of the Cybermen, which is probably one of the best Cybermen stories of all time. You got the companions of Jamie and Victoria, which I think are a fantastic duo and really bounce off the Doctor really well. The introduction of the Brigadier in the Web of Fear, or he was Colonel then. But yeah, there was so much going on. I really wish we could get the Wheel in Space in its entirety to finalise this season. But it is fun. I like the Yeti. I like the Ice Warriors. I think Enemy of the World with Salamander was a fantastic story, and I'm glad we got that in its entirety. But there's a couple of duds here and there. Like, I'm not a big fan of Fury from the Deep, apart from Victoria's departure. I think that's really warming and a really good departure. And I'm not a big fan of the first Yeti story, The Abominable Snowmen, either. Then, coming in 26th place, then we have got season 19. So this is Peter Davison's very first season. Obviously, there was a big change. He did take on a lot of companions like Adric, Nyssa, and Tegan. And it was a continuation of the tonal shift for the 80s. I quite like it. There's a lot of really good stories here, like Earthshock. Again, rivals Tomb to be one of the best Cybermen stories ever. And that cliffhanger at the end of part 1. Oh, plus the death of Adric is still so sad. But then you've got stories like The Visitation is fantastic. Black Orchid, underrated story. I actually really like it. It's a fun story just to throw on if you want something on in the background. Castrovalva's pretty good, although you do spend half the story in the TARDIS, which is a bit annoying. Kinder with the Mara, I think Possessed Tegan is terrifying and done really well. The only real duds of the season are Fort of Doomsday and Time Flight. You can definitely see the budget stuff when it ran out by Time Flight. And whatever the Master was doing in that story was ridiculous. I do feel there was too many companions on the TARDIS, which is why they had to get rid of one, and it ended up being Adric. But yeah, it is a fun season of the Doctor trying to get Tegan back to Heathrow and constantly failing. I think that's a nice little plot thread through the season. And I do think the dynamic of the companions and the Doctor do work, but you can tell, like I said, it was too busy because they had to get rid of one for each story. Like, there was a story where Nyssa was out of action in Kinder, Tegan was possessed for a story, Adric gets killed off, they were trying to get them out the way. But yeah. Then coming in 25th place, then we have got then season 18. So this is Tom Baker's last season and the first story of the 80s. The John Nathan Turner era had begun. There was a very different feel. The lighter, more comedic tone for the Fourth Doctor had changed to a more darker, serious one, which I think does work for Tom, to be honest. And he does do a really good job, but you can tell he's kind of fed up by that point, and relationships and tensions were obviously high behind the scenes as well. And then Tom obviously departed. I liked the E-Space trilogy. I thought that was a nice little touch, you know, and also to bring a companion from that era, like Adric through, was an interesting one. Love the Keeper of Traken, love Logopolis. I love the theming of entropy, you know, and that the end is near and there's something serious is going to happen. And you can tell that as the old companions leave, the Doctor's left with new companions one by one, building up to the Fifth Doctor's arrival, which I love. Logopolis, and I love the concept of the Watcher. Such a fun concept. I really wish they would do that again in Doctor Who, because it was really, really eerie and really did work well with Tom. Then coming in 24th place, then I've got season 8 from the modern era of the show. So this is Peter Capaldi's first season. So as I said, yeah, Peter Capaldi is getting higher up in these lists. I think season 8 is quite a fun one. You know, it was interesting to see the companion and Doctor dynamic really change. This is kind of the companion Doctor dynamic I wanted. This is the perfect blend. I think Clara got too reckless in season 9. This was the good blend. She fancied the Doctor too much in season 7. In season 9, she was too reckless, but this is the perfect blend for Clara, where she is struggling to handle a life with the Doctor and with her new boyfriend, Danny Pink, who it's interesting that the Doctor doesn't get on with Danny, but I like the conflict that you've got going throughout the season. I love the different locations, the different stories. I love the concept of Flatline, where it's like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and the Doctor stuck in the TARDIS. You know, I loved the reveal that Missy was the Master. I just wish two-parter finale was a little bit better. Deep Breath was a nice one, a nice touch, and it was nice to see a cameo from Matt Smith. Robots of Sherwood is such a funny story. I mean, I got Peter Capaldi to sign a quote from that on my Steelbook of Season 8. It is a lot of fun. There is a couple of duds here and there. Like In the Forest of the Night is not a good story. But overall, I did quite enjoy it, and they did push the boat out and try new concepts, so I got to commend them for that. Then in 23rd place, we've actually got season 23. That just so happens to happen. This is the Trial of a Time Lord season for Colin Baker. Another whole long story arc like the Key to Time season, but I think this one's done a lot better. Yes, there's a lot of courtroom scenes where it does feel a lot of talking is going on, but it's the adventures in between, and all of them I think are fascinating. I love the Ravalox one with Drafro, and Glitz and his companion Dibber I think are brilliant. I loved going to Syl's home planet, The Return of Syl, on Thoros Beta, and you see a Doctor that is so unhinged that, you know, he's gone crazy, and you really see the companion Doctor dynamic really pushed to its limits. The potential death of a companion. I think Terror of the Vervoids is a fantastic whodunit sort of story. It is a bit of a flop at the end, and the fact you don't get to see the Doctor regenerate at the end is a bit annoying. And I just wish we could have had Colin longer, but I love the villain of the Valiard. I think he's a fantastic concept. I need him to return. I know obviously he can't as the actor's passed away, but he's a Time Lord. You could get a new person to play him, but fantastic. And Colin's just at his element, and I love this version of 6. He's softened a lot more. He's had the character growth that he was supposed to have on screen, but he had off screen due to the hiatus. So I quite like Trial of a Time Lord. I know it's not to everyone's cup of tea, but it is a favourite of mine. Just missing out on the halfway spot, I've got season 6, so this is Matt Smith's second season. And yeah, this was a little bit of a jumbled mess as well at times. This is one which was split into 2 parts, but not in terms of companions. There was a very darker tone. You know, the whole theming of this season is the death of the Doctor. The Doctor dies at the start of part 1, and Amy and Rory are travelling with a younger, previous version of the Doctor, you know, to try and see how he's going to die, see if they can stop it, and solving different mysteries along the way. There's some really dark stories in this season, like the Rebel Flesh and Almost People. I love a good doppelganger story. You've also got the Doctor's Wife, fantastic story, love that one. Night Terrors, The Girl Who Waited, where Rory is the front and centre person and has to choose between 2 versions of Amy who's been trapped on this planet. It is unbelievable, but I just do think there's a couple of jumbled messes here and there, like the wedding of River Song at the end is not really very good as a finale. I'm not a massive fan of Let's Kill Hitler or A Good Man Goes to War, even though I love the speeches in A Good Man Goes to War. You know, it is just a bit all over the place, but it is still a fun season nonetheless. And I do like the darker tone they gave to the 11th Doctor in this season. Then we have got Season 8 from the classic era coming in at the halfway point. We have got Season 8, so this is the first full season of Jo Grant. So the relationship between the third Doctor and Jo is really, really good in this season. It is the Master season. The Master's the villain in every single story. There's some great stories like Terror of the Autons, The Mind of Evil, The Claws of Axos. But then you've got some duds like Colony in Space, and I'm not a massive fan of the Demons. But I think, yeah, the chemistry between Jo and the Doctor, and even the Brigadier, is fantastic. Roger Delgado's on top form, but it's just the duds that bring it down for me a little bit. Then in 20th place, we have got then, like I said, I decided to include it, we've got the 60th anniversary specials. This was the best part of the RTD2 era, but it still wasn't anything fantastic. But yes, it did make it into my top 20. This is predominantly because I think David Tennant is fantastic as a more wiser, older Doctor. And I think 14, despite only having 3 stories, this will definitely be a hot take. But I personally think 14 is better than 10. I know a lot of people will disagree with that. But I just really like 14 because he's got, you know, all the experiences from 11, 12 and 13 in him while still acting a little bit like 10, you know. So, and I just love it. And all 3 of the stories are good to a degree. Like Star Beast would fit really well in Season 4. This does feel like Season 4B. But a good half of Season 4. While Blue Yonder is my favourite and fantastic, and The Giggle, the first 40 minutes, is phenomenal. It's just, it falls flat when the bi-generation happens. But I think the villains are great. I think the Doctor and Donna are a fantastic duo yet again. It goes to show how perfect for each other they are. Yeah, I just really wish we had a bit more. Then we've got Season 2 from the modern era coming in 19th place. My weakest season of the 10th Doctor. Mostly due to I'm not a fan of the lovey-dovey stuff that was quite prominent in this particular season between the Doctor and Rose Tyler. Obviously, it was the perfect blend in Season 1, but they really do feel like a romantic couple all the way through the season. And the finale with the Daleks versus the Cybermen was cut short by like 20 minutes so that you could have the beach scene with Rose and the Doctor. Just not a huge fan of that. But there's some phenomenal stories again in this season, like The Impossible Planet and Satan Pit, absolutely terrifying. Love School Reunion, The Return of Sarah Jane. I think Rise of the Cybermen, Age of Steel, a fantastic story as well, fantastic 2-parter adventure. You know, The Girl in the Fireplace, really good. Love The Clockwork Droids, love all that. There's a couple of stinkers here and there, like Fear Her. I've grown on Love and Monsters a little bit more, but I still don't think that one's very good. Idiot's Lantern I'm not huge on. Not a huge fan of New Earth, and I'm not a huge fan of Tooth and Claw either, if you ask me personally. So that's why it's a little bit lower, but it's still a really fun season. Then coming in 18th place, we have got Flux. Yes, oh my god, a Jodie Whittaker season up this high. When you see the jump, I know, between Flux and seasons 12 and 11, it is like night and day. I loved Flux. Again, it's like Trial of a Time Lord and Key to Time. It's got a whole story arc. It's 6 stories. This is the COVID season, which is why I give it a lot of credit for what it's worth, for what it managed to achieve during COVID. Absolutely brilliant. I loved The Return of the Weeping Angels. I thought it was done really, really well. Loved The Return of the Sontarans. Thought that was also done really well. I love Dan as a companion. I think the Doctor and Yaz are really good. Wasn't huge that they tried to do a Doctor and Yaz lovey-dovey relationship thing in this. Kind of annoying. But I thought the villains of Flux, apart from their ending, they were one of the most, I think they're the Ravagers, the most menacing, creepy villains I've ever seen in any TV show ever. And they honestly were amazing. And I loved Eve of the Daleks as a special. I loved the Time Loop thing and Power of the Doctor. Oh, Power of the Doctor, the return of Ace, Tegan, all the Doctor cameos. Sasha doing a brilliant job. Jodie on top form. You know, I don't know. Legend of the Sea Devils was not the best, though. And I'm not a massive fan of Once Upon Time. Or I think it's Survivors of the Flux. Episode 5. I'm not a big fan of that one either. But overall, really good. Then coming in 17th place then, we have got Season 7 from the classic series. This is John Pertwee's first full season, 4 stories, Spearhead from Space, Doctor and the Silurians, The Bastards of Death, and Inferno. Inferno is a masterpiece. Spearhead from Space is a masterpiece. Doctor and the Silurians is mid. to just over mid, but I'm not a fan of Ambassadors of Death. But the big thing that brings this down to only 17th place is I'm not a huge fan of the Doctor and Liz as a companion and Doctor duo. I think he works a lot better with Jo. But yeah, overall, fantastic season of the show. First one for the 70s as well. Then in 16th place, I've got season 2, so William Hartnell's second season. I've got it behind me there on the collection box set. Fantastic season. I love pretty much every story in this season, apart from 2 stories. I'm not a fan of the Space Museum. I love the concept of the Space Museum, but not the story itself. And I'm not a fan of the Web Planet either. I also really struggle to watch that one. But I love the Dalek Invasion of Earth. I love the Rescue 2-parter, introducing Vicky. I love the Romans, fantastic comedy. And really good historical story. Love the Time Meddler with the Meddling Monk. Love the Chase. You know, there's so many. The Crusades is good. There's so many good, interesting concepts and companion Doctor dynamics in that season. You know, you've got the Ian, Barbara, Susan, then the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, Vicky, then the Doctor, Vicky and Stephen by the end. It's such a changeover, but they all feel natural, and I think that's a really good blend, if you ask me. Then coming in 15th place, we have got season 11, which is Jon Pertwee's 4th season and final season in the role of the Doctor. The Sarah Jane season, it's got some fantastic stories. The Time Warrior is my favourite Jon Pertwee story. Invasion of the Dinosaurs is a fun one. Obviously, effects-wise, is not the best. Death to the Daleks is not really the greatest Dalek story. Monster of Peladon I like, but it does drag a bit. But I love Planet of the Spiders. I think it was a fantastic end to the Third Doctor. Obviously, it's not the ending we wanted. We wanted a final confrontation between him and Roger Delgado, but sadly, due to the passing of Roger Delgado, we couldn't have that. But for what it's worth, we got a very good end to the Third Doctor, and I quite like season 11. It is one that I put on, like the Time Warrior, quite a lot, and Planet of the Spiders, and even the Invasion of the Dinosaurs I put on a lot as well. Then coming in 14th place, we have got season 3 from the modern era of the show. So this is the second season of the 10th Doctor, and pits the 10th Doctor with Martha Jones. I quite like Freema Agyeman or Agyeman as Martha Jones. I think they have a much better dynamic. I will say, though, that it is annoying that the Doctor tries to constantly compare her to Rose all the time, and they do have a bit of a toxic relationship to start with, but he does grow on her by the end. He realises the error of his ways. I know Martha does sort of start to fancy the Doctor by the end, which is a little annoying, but she does leave on good terms, and I'm glad she comes back in season 4. There's some really solid stories in the season, like Blink, like Blink. Utopia is fantastic. The Family of Blood and Human Nature. You know, there's a lot of really good stories. There's a couple of duds like the Lazarus Experiment, Gridlock. I really like Gridlock. But yeah. It is a good season of the show. Then coming in 13th place, I have got season 26 from the Classic Era. So this is the last full season of the Classic Era and the last season of Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor, with stories like Battlefield, Ghostlight, Curse of Fenric and Survival. Curse of Fenric and Survival are absolutely fantastic. Battlefield's okay. Ghostlight I'm not a huge fan of. I love that this is the proper dark chess master Doctor. You know, he's manipulated his companion from the get-go. We get the climax of the Fenric arc, where he's put the Doctor and Ace together and has been watching them all this time. And the Doctor's got to, like, make Ace break her faith in him in order to save the day. You know, it's all really good stuff. I think the 7th Doctor versus the Master in Survival is really good. The Return of the Brigadier felt a bit forced in Battlefield, but it was nice. But yeah, and I like the theming of Ghostlight, I just didn't like the execution of Ghostlight. But yeah, overall, fantastic season, is worthy of being this high. Then in 12th place, we have got season 6, so the final season of Patrick Troughton, and my favourite of the black and white era 60s show. I think the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe are a fantastic TARDIS team, fantastic trio, fantastic stories like the Mind Robber, the Invasion, the Seeds of Death and the War Games are top-notch. The Dominators and the Crotons are a bit too samey and not the best, if you ask me. Obviously, we haven't got the Space Pirates, but I have heard that one's a little bit of a dud, but we will see if hopefully one day we get it. But I think it is really good to have the future companion, the past companion, and then the Doctor who knows a bit of both. They bounce off each other so well. But yeah, fantastic. And the grand epic of the War Games, introducing us to the Time Lords, was done really, really well. And I don't think the Time Lords have been done better since. Then coming in number 11, just missing on the top 10, we have got season 5. So my favourite Matt Smith season is actually his first season of the show. I think it's done really, really well. You know, obviously, David Tennant was the highlight of the RTD era. You know, a lot of people love David. They joined the show with David. And so, obviously, Matt Smith had a tough job, you know, tough role to follow. But he nailed it. I love the arc of the Crack in the Wall, the Pandorica. I think that's all done really well. Some really fun stories, like the 11th Hour is one of the best post-regeneration stories ever. You know, I like the Angel two-parter. I like the Pandorica Opens, part 1 of that story. You know, there's a couple of duds here and there, like Vampires in Venice I'm not huge on. And I'm not a big fan of The Big Bang. The actual finale is not really up there for me. And The Beast Below, I love what it was trying to do, but I wasn't huge on the story. But yeah, I think Amy and the Doctor, and when Arthur Darvill's Rory comes in halfway through the season, I think it's all done really, really well. So now my top 10. So in 10th place, we have got season 10. So my favourite Jon Pertwee season is season 10, which is behind me on the collection range, the 10th anniversary of the show, with brilliant stories like The Three Doctors, great anniversary story, The Carnival of Monsters, which I recently rewatched, which is brilliant, Frontier in Space is brilliant, just the Doctor and all getting captured all the time was a little annoying, Planet of the Daleks and The Green Death. Now everyone knows that I've got a bit of a hot take in terms of I'm not huge on The Green Death, but that doesn't mean that Joe's goodbye isn't heartbreaking and isn't one of the best pieces of television ever. But yeah, I'm not huge on The Green Death, but overall I quite like a lot of the stories. Coming then in 9th place, we have got season 14. Tom Baker. See, I told you Tom would be quite high. Yeah, Tom Baker's 3rd full season as the Doctor, and this season does have a special place in my heart as it contains The Hand of Fear, which was the very first Doctor Who story I ever watched, and if it wasn't for The Hand of Fear, I don't think I would have watched any of the other Doctor Who stories ever. The Doctor and Sarah are such a powerful dynamic, and it's gutted that they're gone so soon into this season. You've got The Deadly Assassin, which was a good experiment to see if the Doctor could work alone. Good story, but I don't think it would have worked. But then you've got brilliant stories, like I said, Robots of Death and Talons of Wing-Chiang. Despite Talons of Wing-Chiang, yes, being outdated, can be seen as very racist as well. Despite all that, I still think Talons of Wing-Chiang is a fantastic story, and I really do like the Robots of Death as well. And I think the Doctor and Leela work quite well in this season as opposed to their actual full season together. Then coming in 8th place, we have got season 4 from the modern era of the show. So this is my favourite David Tennant season. The Doctor and Donna work really well together. I can't deny that. You know, David Tennant and Catherine Tate are perfect for each other, which is why they worked so well in the 60th anniversary as well when they came back. So many good stories like Midnight, The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, Partners in Crime, you know, Unicorn and the Wasp, The Doctor's Daughter. I mean, the list can go on. Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. Absolutely fantastic stories. There's very few duds in this season, and even the duds are not really terrible stories. It's such a grand epic of the RTD era, and obviously this season also contains, for me, I've put my favourite story, Waters of Mars, because I put the specials in here, and The End of Time, which I do think that the 10th Doctor should have gone out a little bit more heroic than he did in terms of his speech. Obviously, he did go out heroic first in Time Lords, but he shouldn't have done the whole I don't want to go speech. That was a little bit too much for me. But really good season 4. Really did like it. In 7th place then, we have got season 25, which is my favourite season of Sylvester McCoy. 4 stories: Remembrance of the Daleks, The Happiness Patrol, Silver Nemesis, and The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Love the name Greatest Show in the Galaxy, because Doctor Who for me is the greatest show in the galaxy. But Remembrance of the Daleks is such a solid Doctor Who story. It should have been the true anniversary story. I love the Candyman in Happiness Patrol. I'm gutted that we won't ever get to see the Candyman again. And Silver Nemesis, even though it's not the best story, it is nice to see the Cybermen. So yeah, it's a fun season. I highly recommend checking out season 25, especially for the first and last stories of Remembrance of the Daleks and The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Then coming in 6th place then, I've got season 22. Now, a lot of people might be shocked at how high this season is. I believe that Colin Baker is so underrated, and season 22 is such a fun season for me to put on if I'm feeling down, if I'm feeling ill. I can't remember how many times I have felt sick and put on a story from this season. Attack of the Cybermen, Vengeance on Varos, The Two Doctors, they are my go-to stories if I'm not feeling very well, and I know I'm going to have a great time. Yes, you've got stories like Time Lash and Mark of the Rani in this season, but I think the good outweigh the bad, and I think Colin Baker, despite the companion Doctor dynamic not being done very well because the Doctor's not very nice to Perry, such a fun season, and yes, I might get criticised for liking it as much as I do, but I really like season 22. Okay, then my top 5. Coming in 5th place then, I've got season 13. Tom Baker's second full season as the Doctor. What more can I say? Season 13 is phenomenal. You know, it's got so much... It takes inspiration from so many different horror tropes and types. You know, you've got like a Frankenstein story in the brain of Morbius. You've got the Pyramids of Mars, which is like the Mummy. You've got Planet of Evil, which is like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde meets Forbidden Planet style. You've got the Terror of the Zygons, which is fantastic. The Seeds of Doom is phenomenal. You know, this android invasion. It's just, the season is so strong. You know, that and the Doctor and companion dynamic is brilliant. There is not a single story in that season that I think is bad. The closest is Planet of Evil, and I still think that's good. So yeah, watch season 13. I'm glad it came out on the collection range before Key to Time. Definitely recommend getting it. Then in 4th place then, I've got season 10 from the modern era of the show. Again, like I said, I love Peter Capaldi, I did say, and yeah, it is absolutely amazing. I love season 10 so much. It's, again, probably the modern series guilty pleasure for me, and, you know, if I'm feeling down or ill, I will put on a story from season 10. I think the Dr. Bill and Nardole, fantastic TARDIS team, my favourite modern series TARDIS team. Love them all so much. World of Enough and Time and The Doctor Falls, brilliant finale. The only true multi-master story. Then you've got other great stories like Oxygen and the Monk trilogy, and fun stories like Thin Ice and Knock Knock. You know, there's just so much to love about this season. I think the Doctor being blind was a little bit of a weird choice. But I think overall it was nice. I also loved the Ice Warrior story, especially for the return of Alpha Centauri. But yeah, I love season 10, and obviously this does have Twice Upon a Time in it, which isn't the greatest Christmas special or regeneration story of all time, but it is a nice, heartwarming one. Okay, who's taking the bronze medal then? Well, bronze medal is going to season 21. So Peter Davison's last season, and also has the Twin Dilemma, which the Twin Dilemma does knock it from not getting first or second, but it's the Peter Davison stuff that I adore in this season. It's got my favourite Doctor Who story of all time in this season, The Caves of Androzani, which that in itself deserves to make it into the top 10. I like Planet of Fire, I like Resurrection of the Daleks. Frontios, I love the dark tone of that. I think The Awakening is quite fun. Warriors of the Deep, yes, is not the best. I think the Blu-ray box set makes it a lot better. It's nice to have the Sea Devils versus the Silurians, and yes, obviously the tonal shift between Caves and Twin Dilemma is night and day different. But I think, for what it's worth, this is such a solid season. Peter Davison is on top form from start to finish, especially in the stories where he's losing his companions and his own life, like losing Tegan in Resurrection, losing Turlough in Planet, and then losing his own life in Caves of Androzani. I think that has a toll, and I think that is also partly the reason why the Doctor's so chaotic in Twin Dilemma. He's been through a lot lately. But yeah, brilliant season, highly recommend it. It did come out on the collection range, so I'm finally have it, and I'm so happy. Okay then, second place is going to Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper, Season 1, the very first season of Doctor Who in the modern era in 2005 when RTD originally did the show. This is as close to a flawless season as you can get. Season 1, apart from the long game, I adore every story in some way, shape or form. The Doctor and Rose in the 9th Doctor form, absolutely brilliant and work so well together, and I adore every single second they are on screen together. There is not a moment that I don't. They have great conflict, great laughs together, and they help each other out in the best ways possible. Like I said, the only dead is the long game, but despite that, it's really good. There's stories like Dalek, which is my favourite modern Doctor Who story of all time. There's stories like Father's Day, The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances, Parting of the Ways, and Bad Wolf, or Bad Wolf and then Parting of the Ways. Boomtown is such a funny story as well. You know, The End of the World is brilliant. I don't know. There's just so much good in this season. I love the Slitheen. I love Cassandra. I like the Doctor having to go from being this dark character who survived the Time War to then being the Doctor that we know and love by the end through the eyes of Rose. I think that's done so well. If there's one season of the Modern Show I recommend you watch, it has to be season 1. And then obviously taking the top spot for me is season 12, Tom Baker's first season. Again, another season that I would put on any story at any time and have a great time. Robot, Ark in Space, Sontaran Experiment, Genesis of the Daleks, and Revenge of the Cybermen. Yes, Revenge of the Cybermen is the weakest in that season, but despite that, it is a fun story. Genesis is one of the best stories ever written. Sontaran Experiment is a fun little two-parter. Ark in Space is scary and done so well, and I love the dynamic between the Doctor, Sarah, and Harry, my favourite TARDIS team of all time. And Robot, yes, it's a story built for Jon Pertwee, but Tom is flawless in it and works so well with the unit crew, and I just adore it. It's just absolutely brilliant, and you need to watch season 12. I'd recommend my top 3, even the top 5 are must-watches for me if you have to watch a season of Doctor Who. But there we have it. Sorry that was such a long video, but we had an awful lot to talk about. But that is going to be my list of ranking every single season of Doctor Who from 1963 to 2025. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please like it by giving it a thumbs up and comment down below what would your list be, or even just what would your top 5 be and why. But can we make sure we keep all comments respectful, please? And subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is the Nerdy Grail signing off. Thank you for an amazing 2 years on YouTube, and I hope to keep doing this far into the future. Subscribe if you are new. But this is me signing out for now. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!